Hey there, folks. Welcome to Get Centered. This is a space where the practitioners from the Center for the Healing Arts and Sciences come together and talk about topics that are of interest. It's born out of an interest for us. We hope you like it too. Today we're going to talk about music. Also, hang around. A couple other practitioners, myself included, here at the Center for the Healing Arts are releasing an album. The band is called Spirit and the Trickster, and I'm going to include a music video at the very end. So please hang around. Be sure to like and subscribe to the page, and also hit the bell so you get notifications whenever we release new episodes. Check us out at the centerforhas.com. For now, hang around and enjoy the show. So welcome back to Get Centered, folks. Today's topic is a very exciting topic. It's the topic of music. And Rodney Waters and I have been in a band together for a while, and the album is coming out this next week. Actually, by the time you watch this, it will be coming out last week. And of course, it initiated a desire to converse about what music is, what creativity is, and certainly the band is integrating depth psychology and creativity and music. And so we'll talk a little bit about those topics. And certainly let you know about the album. The band is called Spirit and the Trickster. Check out the website, spiritandthetrickster.com. And we will have links to all the information down below. For now, be sure to like the episode and subscribe to the page. And when you see the little bell in the corner, be sure to hit all so that you are aware when new episodes come out. And we really thank you for that, because it helps us actually. It helps us a lot by you participating. And I know as one, YouTube person that I have just recently started subscribing to people, it really does help us, and we're grateful. So welcome, y'all. How you doing? Hanging in. Good. We've been chatting for a bit, so we're feeling lively and ready to start today's discussion. Rodney, you want to take us there?
Sure. Just start off with music. As a lifelong musician, the experience of music has always been a part of my life, but it wasn't until I really started training as a Jungian analyst and working with clients that I realized how helpful the concepts of music can be for all of us, because generally everyone has some sort of relationship to music and the expressive arts. This, especially in today's age where there's so much about arts in schools and creative things, as opposed to math and more logical left brain types of things. I just like to point to the painting behind me, the Lascaux Caves, about 18,000 years ago, where we're talking about painting, we're talking about image representation of things, we're talking about shamans playing drums, we're talking about music, and how important that has been to human evolution and why. And I would like to propose that as we talk at the center about healing and health being a mind, body, soul issue, that we're in such a logical sort of left brain way of conceptualizing and thinking about things, that so often the experiences of our lives become a thought process describing the experiences of our lives rather than the actual experience. And that's nowhere clearer to me than with music. We all have music that we relate to, that we love, that we have reactions to, various reactions to. And just imagine your favorite song, your favorite piece of music, something that really does it for you, something that really takes you somewhere else. And imagine describing that to someone, knowing they will never hear it. You can describe a piece of music in a lot of ways. And you can understand it, from a music theory point of view. You can talk about how it's put together, what the notes are, what the notes mean, the theory behind it. There's a lot of intellectual conceptualization that's possible, but ultimately, that's not the experience of the music itself. And so often with clients and with my own work, with my analysts, I'll be talking about something, a dream or something that happened, and all that's coming out is my description of what happened, and not a real understanding or an embracing of that experience, which involves body, which involves a whole set of feelings, which involves more of the whole person and the whole experience. Often our rationalizations serve as a guard against, and with trauma, and a very important guard against those overwhelming and traumatic experiences. But in a more sort of everyday way, I think we also get caught up in thought processes, and this would be really relate to Ariel and everything that he does, that, we experience so much, or we miss so much of our experiences simply because they become trains of thought in our mind. So, I worked with some incredible music therapists at the Texas Medical Center. Jennifer Townsend has an amazing crew over there. And Audrey worked with her in the psychiatric unit at Methodist Hospital, really using music as medicine because we understand how much it affects our emotions. So how can we be conscious of the music we're listening to as a way to either embrace what we're feeling? I mean, what feels better than when you're feeling sad? To hear a piece that triggers that so that you actually, maybe cry and have that emotion, or to find something that shifts you into a more objective, a better place, or all that. So with all of this and everything that the band is doing, I just think it's important to encourage people not just to find creativity in their own lives, playing an instrument, writing, painting, whatever it is, but also listening to music as not such a passive experience, but what am I getting from this? What is it triggering? What am I feeling? What does it remind me of? And as more of an embodied experience rather than just an intellectual process. So that's sort of where I would throw things out.
I immediately started thinking about the podcast I've been doing for several years now. And, as a musician, I played music since I was 6. I wanted to have music involved in the podcast, and I wanted to curate all the songs that were somewhat related to each episode. I really thought a lot about what intro music, and I had a lot of friends in the music world, and so I would reach out to old friends and say, can I use your songs? And what that started doing is I would listen to the entire catalog of these folks. I hadn't even done that when I was 20 and in the music world. And it started generating a new way of envisioning music. And I, quite frankly, Rodney, I think a lot of that opened up music for you and I to be playing together in the way we are now, because I started actively listening. I mean, when you're up early in the morning and you're listening to 50 songs that have been released over the course of 6 years, you hear nuances in the way somebody's expressing their creativity, and it inspires something that's unconscious inside of ourselves. So I like what you're saying about the idea of active listening. It's not just something where you've got it in the background, the kind of Muzak world where it's just something that kind of goes on and helps us deal with anxiety. But it engages and it speaks deeply to even early parts of our development. And as I was thinking about this conversation today, I was reading about attachment. And one study that really blows my mind is a year after an infant is born, they have a preference to music that they listen to while in the womb. And the way they did this study was really radical. They took these mothers and they put music, they played music, specific songs, and then they were not allowed to listen to that music until they were a year. And then they would do this kind of head tilt thing. They would watch where the baby looked when various songs were played. And they had control groups, and it was irrefutable. The children respond better to music that happened early on in life. And so 2 things come to mind. The first is that, wow, that's really kind of amazing that we can, that even in infants in utero, there's something that's happening with how the human being responds to this form of expression called music, but also that there's a memory. So for years, we thought about like memories aren't laid down until much later because it's a form of, they accompany language acquisition, but that's not the case. We remember things, it's not remembered in the same way that we remember today as adults. And so that, it blows my mind. And you're talking about the cave drawings and the drums and the shaman. Some of the earliest artifacts that we have of our human experience, this human project we've been running for millennia, they're music artifacts, drums and stringed instruments. And early on, they were all percussive instruments. So this is something that we've been drawn to. that we want to hear. We want to respond to frequency. And so current day, we have this, pianos and guitars and all kinds of different instruments we can use to communicate something that can't be communicated through language. And my interest with the podcast and The Sacred Speaks is looking at mystical events, sacred experience, religious experience, not from a dogmatic lens, but from what is this thing that exists, religion and spirituality. And of course, music is interwoven into this. And I think about William James and the way that he defined mystical experience. It's something that's ineffable, that you can't put it into words. You can't describe it. So if you have some blissed out experience, trance-like experience at a rock and roll show, you try to go in and share that with your friends. My brother and I went and saw a Sigur Rós show years ago. This is 20 years ago. And I think we were silent for an hour afterward. We experienced a total transformation, and it took us someplace. It took us out of the mundane and out of our normative experience. And it's totally subjective. And we now share that together, which is the other piece I want to kind of, in the attachment world, I want to plant this seed about music and identity. There's a reason why, as we age, we tend to have a particular response to the music that we listen to in our adolescence. Primarily when our brain is forming, we attach all these, for better or worse, all these experiences to particular music. And then later on, through the pruning process of our brain, we just are attached to that. We don't really adapt to new music, which is why, the rock and roll folks don't tend to listen to hip hop. I feel lucky that I actually like all of it. So I want to be able to talk a little bit about the band, Rodney. I want us to get into that. But first, do any of you guys have any thoughts that come to mind as Rodney and I are kind of, let's get into it.
I mean, of course, you took me to 7th grade Guns N' Roses.
Yes!
Appetite for Destruction. But as a child, I was very, very musical, sang all the time, played piano, but unfortunately, adulthood happened to me, and I let the lessons go and the training go, and now I do feel a bit trapped inside myself in terms of, what would be better than to feel sad and then go play the piano and play those feelings out, so I envy people who, whether it is painting or music or any other form of artistic expression, have the training that they need to be able to emote in that way. But that somatic piece that you're talking about, even just experience, even if you can't play the music, just experiencing it in your body and your senses. There's also an experience I've had with the way we access music. I'll date myself, but at first it was my record collection, and I was so tender with it, and I put it all right back as soon as I was finished with one record to get the next one out. My mom would even notice, I love how you care for your records, and that was huge. And then of course it was tapes, and then the CDs, and then it was digital, and it lost me. And at first there was a way to get, there was I guess, an upside to it, that there would be a lot of, if you like this, then you might like that. So there was discovery at first, but then that changed. So even the way I access my music is less somatic than it used to be. And that's something I'm really finding I'd like to work around and rediscover,
Yes.
And the somatic piece that from most of human history, music was a shared experience. It only happened live. There was no such thing as being able to passively listen to something and not be in the same room with it. So go ahead.
Unless you were creating the sound, right? I don't know, I'm thinking about my childhood music and like the stuff I listened to when I was growing up and like getting excited about music. And then, I remember this one time when I was listening to one of the old songs I used to listen to, and my wife is like, she turns to me and she's like, she kind of met me in my post bad boy time. so she's like, I'm listening to these songs. It's still like, I like the beat. I like the rhythm. I'm not the kind of person who's really listening that much to the words. I'm listening to the flow of the words more than anything. So I'm not conscious of what's being said and what's being transmitted. And my wife looks at me one time. I remember she was like, what the fuck are you listening to? Like, she was like, do you hear the words? Like, do you? And I was like, no. And I started looking at the lyrics, and all of a sudden I was like, I grew up in LA. I grew up listening to Dr. Dre, and I was listening to like 50 Cent and like whatever, Eminem. And I'm listening it, and it's, and I started looking at the lyrics, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. This is horrible what's being said in terms of just the music as culture, but also music as what I think I very strongly internalized in my earlier life as kind of the values of what's important in society and how we can fit in. So I know we're talking about like a little bit of a different thread, but ever since that moment, I've been very careful about what music I listen to and how it does or doesn't influence me. So I'm like, it's not that I don't listen to some of the old stuff anymore, but I have to be in a certain frame where I'm listening to it in a certain way so that it doesn't then just like subtly, subliminally overtake me.
I want to speak to that, if that's okay. The concept of like curing like. So if you're in an angry mood listening to hardcore metal, if you're sad listening to the blues or whatever, it's similar to like if we're working with somebody in herbs and let's say they have a cold condition. So we're going to instruct them to eat warming foods and give them warming herbs, etc. We still need to have an herb in that formula that's cooling to guide the warming herbs to that place. And so I think if we can look at, if there's a teen who's really struggling and they are listening to hardcore stuff with messaging that's like, I don't know how, right consumption people, I think if we can look at it with, there's an entry point here, as opposed to it being all bad.
Right.
There's a good reason for it.
Rodney was talking about Jennifer Townsend, and I interviewed her a year or two ago. In Methodist, they have these studies they ran on PRN meds, as needed meds, and some of the meds they use on the psychiatric unit are pretty intense. They'll knock you out pretty quickly. And what they discovered is that if they create a playlist with the patient, something that they choose and they work on it together, and they have these areas of the unit where you can go listen to the music. She told me that they reduced PRN meds by 50% simply by listening to music. So, again, we run the risk of getting into that. One person said that music is kind of like the undesirable of the academic world. It's the first thing we cut, the arts and music when schools don't get funding. So it's not linear and it's not logical, but it taps into something deep inside of us that we can't really understand. And yet we still also have these quantitative measures that suggest there's a value to music that's beyond something that's just identity or just a beat or just, a kid rebelling. There's something powerful. And I think about what you're saying, Lilo Scott, these kids I've worked with before, they are angry and they are suffering and they're being told what to do and when to do and how to do it. So they're listening to this music that's pissed and it's like trying to bust out of the box, and they need to identify with that. And if we as parents or caregivers kind of run in there and take that away from them, it's like the story of Romeo and Juliet, don't fuck with that. You're messing with somebody's identity. Eddie, you got anything you're working with?
Yeah, it was the thread about how powerful music is, and the power is in the music tapping into the archetypes or something going on in the zeitgeist, we might say the unconscious, collective unconscious. But it's a way to express something that is going on inside of us that we can't really touch or we don't know how to express. And experiencing it through others helps us experience it in ourselves. And it's, think back about a song that was powerful to you when you were 13. You're instantly transported to that time. And it's that feeling. it's tapping into that feeling that you had, and those experiences are somewhat permanent. And that's, to me, that's that power of music to tap into those emotions that we often suppress.
Yeah.
Thinking about this, like this duality of like being in our head versus, actually experiencing, and how there's really no substitute for having the actual felt experience of a show, or like a particular album listened in a way, or just or meditative experience, right? If you've never had that experience of like kind of getting still, which is not the goal necessarily of the practice, but if you haven't had it, to describe it to somebody else is like, it's like that cave metaphor that we use. Is it Aristotle or Plato? Plato. Plato's cave metaphor is basically, can somebody say it more eloquently than I'm gonna mess it up if I try, but it's John.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking at if somebody is, in a cave and all they can see are figures outside, the shadows projected onto the cave walls, and that's their experience of reality. It posits this kind of thought experiment around what are the implications of that experience of reality versus what's happening out there.
Right, and somebody who goes outside of the cave and sees the light of day and sees the actual trees and not just the shadows of the trees, right, and sees what's happening, and then comes back into the cave and tries to, there's no way to express to somebody who lives in the cave what is happening outside the cave.
Right.
Because they don't have anywhere for it to land. And I'm thinking about, I don't know, I like the analogy. I don't think it's totally true. I think we all kind of know, like have a feeling and a knowing inside. It's just that we may have spent, because of trauma, or, or because of, I think we all in our youth had that, some kind of version of that. Hopefully we weren't traumatized so early that we had to shut it off really, really early. But I do find that most people I encounter, and myself included, sort of that growing up thing that you're talking about, Lila Scott, of as we grow up, we get a little further and further away from that essence of, we're talking about music, but we're not just talking about music. We're talking about whatever it is that's that universal kind of power, frequency that drives, that is, when we experience it, it's like, whoa, it can be even just overwhelming. It can be transform. I mean, I'm not being paid to say this, but I listened to John and Rodney's album, and I mean, I gave myself the space to listen, to give myself over to the music and just feel it and just experience it. And I carved out a chunk of time to do that. Once the kid was sleeping and my wife was watching her shows, whatever, I could be quiet and just do it. And it moved me. I mean, I listened from beginning to end, and I felt like it had moved me through an experience that was transformative. I mean, I felt like it did some healing to me in my process. So I think that, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find ways to do that, to have that express in our lives, not just with this music, but with daily practice, with meditation, with art, with painting, with whatever it is that, it's not linear, right? It's not linear, and it's not always clear what's what. So
thank you, Ariel. That's amazing. So it worked, it's interesting. I think about the way that I wrote songs when I was younger, and they were songs. They were these little 3.5 minute, 4 minute poems put to music, essentially, about an experience or a breakup or whatever. And the way that Rodney and I were working on this is more of a narrative. It's an album. I mean, it's going back to what was happening in the 60s when people were really writing albums and not singles. And, as a friend of mine just said today, in the world of TikTok, when everybody's got about 15 seconds, I guess it's our personalities that we want to write a 34-minute musical experience that we recommend listening to from start to finish. And for me, what's happening underneath all that, this line keeps coming to mind, is do we take it seriously? And we are surrounded by efficiency and utilitarian behaviors. How productive can we be? Back to a conversation we had last week, I think. What are we producing? And usually, if the answer is I'm producing something that involves making money, then we can justify that. But if it's something that meanders, or something that allows for curiosity, or for self-awareness, or to express something that can't quite be expressed in words, then it opens us up. And I think other people feel that. And for me, the process of doing this album was really about taking seriously these narratives and this form of expression. And I hope it's communicated. Thank you, Ariel, for saying that. But that's to me what the religious life is all about. It doesn't have to do with any particular tradition. It doesn't have to do with any particular orientation. It's, are you taking the movements of your psyche and of the world seriously? And do you relate with it with a degree of intentionality? And does that become a principle by which you live your life?
And what do you cultivate? Right?
Totally.
Do you cultivate it in your life is the question, because because we know, I mean, maybe I'm just assuming this, but it seems to me that if I'm not cultivating this regularly, it just won't be there.
Yeah.
Right. There's no access point later. It's the same thing. Like, Lil Scott, you said, can you sit down at the piano and just express your emotion? Right. Rodney can do that because Rodney has put in so freaking much work that it's there, right? It's there. It's at his fingertips. He can do it because he's spent so much time cultivating. And I think the same thing is true. That's why we call these practices, right? It's practice because it takes that time. There's one thread that I really, it's like feeling very important for me to pick up here, which is, I think we spend a lot of our lives lost and sort of chasing after what the world kind of expects from us, or like our parents, or whatever message we got in the music we were listening to, and we forget to check in with that stillness. There's a reason that one of the most beautiful images that I can think of in the Bible, in the Torah, it says, like, the way that you'll experience the divine is not in the loud bangs. It's in the still small voice. Kol dmama daka yishama. It's in the stillness. It's in that quiet. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you want to be able to notice that, you have to just stop and sit and learn how to pay attention and learn how to bring yourself into that space, so that you can hear what it's telling you, like, so you can start to learn to listen to that, and to then, because I think a lot of the issues we have in life are because we're not listening to that. Mm-hmm. We don't know how to listen to that, or we know what it's saying, but we're so caught up in our identity or the cultural values or fitting into whatever it is we think we need to do, and not listening to that. And then our lives, that's how we end up neurotic and anxious, and it's like a blocked energy. We know if we know, but if we don't know, then we can learn to listen, right? We can learn to listen. And I think that's actually what I describe as, in the practice, as listening to your soul calling you, mm-hmm. listening to what it's calling you to do. And you have to learn to be quiet enough to hear it. And to me, that is the divine. That is the divine. So thinking about that frequency, this is I don't know, it's important to me, but it seems to me that can only be done if you just learn to just experience what's happening, as opposed to just being in that mental space.
To me, I call that, what it feels like to me is dropping in, becoming embodied in a world where so much of me has to be outside of my body and scanning constantly. I've done a lot of yoga training, and one person that I train intensively with is Anna Forrest, and she said so well that, unfortunately through our life traumas, we get kind of like shocked out of our bodies. And so the way she describes it is like we're kind of dragging our spirit or soul, by a leash behind us because it's too painful to be in our bodies, But every now and then, I know, but the music or the counseling or the sound healing, that can bring us back in. And yes, there's healing that needs to happen and we don't know where we're stuck, but that's the beauty of something like sound healing, is that those vibrations are going to go where they need to go, and when they bump up against a stuck place, they will break through it. Sound healing is real.
Yeah, and what a blessing to have. I mean, I'll just for myself to have a group of people who are wandering the same path, that we can, I think that's the beauty of having a crew of people who are doing the same thing as you and moving in the same direction, is that you just don't have to do it alone. You can't really do it alone, right? It's communal. It's a movement of community. And we're talking about music, but we're not just talking about music. We're talking about life.
Yeah, but music is a perfect metaphor for this too. I mean, I think about like, okay, you play one note, then you play 6 notes, then you've got a chord, then you've got a band, then you've got a symphony, and everybody working for a shared purpose to make something beautiful. One thing I do need to define, we keep saying express, the term express, and I love this term. It means to press out. And our language conceals a lot of very important aspects of what's happening inside. And to express oneself, to use one's voice in whatever way we do that, it is to embody ourselves in a different way. And Leela Scott, I want to tee you up to say what you guys were talking about in your vocal lessons with vocalizing.
In which aspect of it?
Well, about the emotion and what people are doing when they're vocalizing. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a high soprano, and when my vocal teacher was getting me way, way, way up, I just bent over and started giggling so hard. And she was like, "Do you know why you're laughing?" And I thought, well, I don't know, it's fun. And she goes, "No, do you really know why you're laughing?" People tend to either burst into tears or burst into laughter when they hit these really high or really low notes, because the only other time that we express ourselves in those really high or really low notes are during emotive times. You're really happy or you're really angry or you're, and so it triggers that emotional aspect of yourself. But also what you were saying just about the magic of it not just being a note or 6 notes, but then it's a symphony. I think so often why we can just become so tearful is it's a feat if you think about it. I mean, the coordination, the cooperation of all of these humans, and even just what it takes inside one human to pull it together and to create something that's a gift for everybody who gets to hear it. I mean, that's powerful stuff.
Rodney, I want to know, just kind of getting back to the album, because one of the things you and I initially talked about is you've been from a very early age playing in orchestras and very theory oriented. You read music, and one thing I've been excited about for this album is that you were writing music. Basically the album is 4 songs with lyrics and 3 musical interludes that I think are just golden. I mean, Rodney, they're beautiful pieces of music. I'm wondering what it was like for you to get back to writing and to put it out in this way.
Well, it was, also to be said that, this sort of began as a COVID project. John and I recorded everything remotely. We sent it to a really amazing Taylor editing
producer, engineer, yeah,
musician, brilliant guy. But this grew out of an event we did at the Young Center in 2019, and so when we presented more intellectual and conceptual ideas about psychology, Jungian analysis, personal development, it's one thing to present these ideas as sort of as concepts. But as musicians, we're like, we want to present the ideas, and then we want to create a space for people to experience emotionally, to open up, to see where those ideas land. Because if it's only ideas and there's no real connection, then that sort of falls on unfertile soil. Ariel could elaborate on that. Or if it's only an emotional response to something and there's no sort of intellectual understanding. So it's an attempt to balance those things. So we also came up with a way of having a song with lyrics and then an instrumental piece. So there's something more to think about and experience, and then sort of an open place to see what emerges out of that. And, you know, in the show before, I used piano music by composers, Eric Satie and Robert Schumann and Claude Debussy and a few composers like that. But when we created the CD, the album coming out, we decided, you know, I haven't really put myself to writing music for a very, very long time. It's something I grew up doing and then thought, well, I'm not really a composer. So I would work with other musicians and do other things. I thought, well, you know, we're all locked up during COVID, might as well see what happens and see what comes out of it. So then I would use John's inspiring lyrics and songs that he's written and that we collaborated on to see then what emerged from me as a nonverbal musical response to those. So to create a space to sort of conceptualize something and then metabolize something, conceptualize, metabolize. And it was a challenging and an exciting process. And I think that's the other side of this COVID time, is that with our normal things, normal distractions, normal ways of conceiving of ourselves and our identity, so much taken away, you know, we have equal opportunities to either grab onto something harder or to see, well, what else is there, you know, that might not have emerged during this time. So John and I decided to put our, you know, money where our Jungian mouths are and see what came out. So, you know, it's really inspiring to work with this group of people, because again, with all of us, I think, you know, with Eddie talking about dream interpretation, it's the same thing. With Ariel talking about meditation, it's the same thing. With Chinese medicine and Leela Scott, we're all talking about various aspects of body, mind, and soul and what our entry points are. And, you know, it just seems to me music is an entry point that everyone has access to. And with a little more intentionality, there's a lot to be discovered about our own journeys through our relationship to music.
Well, and just to add to that, and I know we got to finish, but it has been an exploration of my own vulnerability, because when you go inside to that's a pretty safe place, but when you perform or when you externalize these things that you're exploring, and then they're up for critical analysis and interpretation by somebody else, you know, they're no longer held in this sweet little sacred space in your own heart. You know, you're bringing something out there, and it has been painfully vulnerable for me. You know, I was probably more equipped when I was 20, you know, and releasing an album then, and now it's like, whoa, there's something really big happening. And so it has been, I think, an honor and an opportunity to work with you, Rodney, on this, but also to dig in these trenches with you guys in projects like this we're doing with Get Centered.
Thanks for giving us the album.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for today, everybody. Thank you for being here. Please be sure to subscribe, to like, to share, to hit the bell so that you get the notification whenever we post a new video, and send us an email, info@the Center for HAS, if you have an idea for a topic that you'd like for us to discuss, or you just have some feedback for us. We'll have plenty of notes for you in down below, where we talk about all the stuff we've referenced, especially that album we've been talking about. So we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
A little daydream sends me slowly off to sleep. meeting memories of those around the table I can't keep. As the sun greets the night and breaks the magic of the dark, the writer of your reason takes his place to make his mark. In many ways I know there's something just beneath. I feel the polar forces leading me to places underneath, where hidden secrets live, known to the chambers of your heart. This is only a beginning in how many stories start. Release the people from going wild, formed in their image as a child, held up high, and now all the gods have died, poisoned by words that colonize. There's no opposition, paradox, where's the tension? So I'll put on the face that you want me to, walk this way and sing songs for you. And even though I'm hurting, you won't know it. Of this I'm certain, that's just what masks do. The king is sick and requests fabric and a ring. No dragon will be slain today. The hero's after other things, like how to hold a daydream in the palm of your hand, encountering adventure and things you cannot understand. I'm a fool, I'm a riddle, I'm really quite obtuse. I'm a soul trying to take flight, wearing a gilded concrete suit, held down by forces known within the chambers of my heart, creating and obstructing my desires from the start. The greatest trick that anyone has ever tried is place wisdom within those who look for it outside and up high. Songs for you, and even though I'm hurting, you won't know it. Of this I'm certain, it's just what masks do. You